You're watching Fugitive Red Eye, and welcome to another episode of Takeshi Tuesdays. Today's episode will be a little bit different, and then it's not going to be a movie review. Today I'll be talking about an actual thing that happened in Takeshi's life. Now, this story is one that happened back in 1986. Now, there are very limited resources I could find on this actual incident, at least online. I do vaguely recall reading it on his Wikipedia page in the past, but I can't find it on any of the archived versions of it, nor is it on the current version. So I can't confirm whether or not it actually ever was on the Wikipedia page, but I do distinctly remember reading it there before I read it in the book that I have read it in now. So, the primary source I'm using for this event is a book entitled Beat Takeshi vs. Takeshi Kitano, which was written by Kasio Abe. Specifically, it's mentioned a few times in the book, but the primary information of it I get comes from the foreword, which was written by Daisuke Miyayo. Apologies if I'm saying any of these names wrong. It's also mentioned in the translator's notes at the end to give a little bit more context. There are a couple of contradictions between the two versions that are written in the book, since they're written by different people, so I'm going to try and craft the best version of this story I can, but if there are any things that I get incorrect, that's simply because I'm going on limited resources and attempting to fill in the gaps myself. But suffice to say, this story is something interesting. Now, we all know Takeshi Kitano has played all sorts of Yakuza badass gangster thugs, and in his movies, his character is always someone you just don't want to fuck with. Well, I would say that that definitely carries over to his real-life self, and this story is a great example of that. Now, with this story, I'm not condoning the things that necessarily happened, because they're things that are obviously illegal, and things that you don't want to do because you can get yourself into trouble. Nor do I think this is a reflection of Takeshi's character now, because I think, obviously, since that was back in the 80s, that was quite some time ago, and since he hasn't really had any legal incidents since then, I wouldn't imagine that this is representative of his character. But, back in 1986, there was a tabloid known as Friday, which printed an article heavily featuring pictures of a college student who they tried to perpetuate that Takeshi was having an affair with. Apparently they kind of harassed this girl and walked around just kind of constantly badgering her and taking a ton of pictures. Takeshi's actual relationship with this girl is unclear. From what I saw, one version of the story said that it was just a college student that they were trying to say he was having an affair with, whereas another version of the story says it was actually one of his girlfriends that they were harassing and he wasn't happy about that. Regardless, either way, he wasn't happy with what they were doing, so he decided to take matters into his own hands. So he and 11 other people, which are known as the Takeshi Army, which, if I'm not mistaken, is a group of fellow comedians at the time, gathered up and decided to go pay the office of this tabloid a visit. And they grabbed what are described in the book as quote-unquote bats and other weapons and went in there. From that point, they stormed into the studio and beat up the editorial staff and trashed the place. They beat the fuck out of all the staff there and trashed the place. Now, because of this, Takeshi did wind up getting an assault charge. However, they were settled out of court, and part of the deal, he was not able to go on TV for 6 months following the incident. Now, with all that being said, despite all of this, 1986 was still a very busy year for Takeshi, because despite this happening, he still went on to start doing Takeshi's Castle in 1986. I would assume that was after his 6-month mandatory hiatus. Other than that, he also would go on to release Takeshi's Challenge that year, the notorious video game which you're probably seeing on-screen footage of now. So with all that being said, 1986 was a very busy year for Takeshi, but the point is, you don't want to fuck with him, because you don't want to end up like the staff at Friday. Now, from what I understand, following this incident, anytime he'd talk about the Friday incident, he's very open about it, but he's also very lighthearted and kind of laughs it off like it's not really a big deal. Obviously, like I said, there were no follow-up incidents, and I don't think Takeshi is a particularly violent man, but I personally wouldn't want to push my luck trying to fuck with him. When you think about it, with his upbringing, he did grow up around a lot of Yakuza, and he did say that he kind of looked up to them as role models, so I do think that definitely is part of why he's such a badass in that sense. And I do think if you're going to go around spreading stuff about people, you're going to deserve whatever you get, because frankly, I don't appreciate that kind of tabloid journalism where they just attack people's personal lives like that. See, the kind of tabloid journalism I like is shit like Weekly World News or The Onion, where it's just ridiculous news stories that obviously are not true, like, I married Bigfoot, or I was abducted by aliens who told me I was the next king of the world, or whatever, all sorts of weird stories, or Bat Boy. But when it's like celebrity gossip, I couldn't give two shits. Frankly, I hope that staff learned their lesson and didn't fuck with him again. I assume so. Anyway, this has been Fugitive Red Eye for another episode of Takeshi Tuesdays. Next week will also not be a review. It'll be me again talking about another incident in his life. So next week I'll be talking about the motorcycle accident, so stay tuned for that. But after that, I will be going back to the reviews. Anyway, this has been Fugitive Red Eye. Have a great day.
Subscribe to Fugitive Red Eye.